Welcome to tonight's evening with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. It's the orchestra's second concert of the season here. The second concert is our orchestra in residence, which we're very excited about, and even more excitingly, it's Robin Ticciati's first concert in St Andrews as principal conductor of the orchestra. Robin, we're delighted that we've managed to spare some time to talk a little to us about the orchestra today, so thank you very much indeed for that. I wanted to start off by asking why you wanted to work with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra in the first place. You obviously to say that you know lots from all over the world with different orchestras and opera companies. What particularly attracted you to work to make this commitment to the Scottish Chamber Orchestra?
Well, I first met the orchestra just on a week. It was a guesting week. I was only once in the diary, and I had worked with the Mahler Chamber Orchestra and the Orchestra in Enlightenment quite a lot, and for me it was, I love those chamber orchestras, and it was just an opportunity, and so I thought, well, let's come and see, and then the first week was just so magical and wonderful with them, and I suppose when you ask me what I love about them, what I love working with them, is their intense energy and love for the music, and the will to work and to find and to experiment, to improvise, to really be sort of living musicians. And I think that's the wonderful thing. When I stand in front of them, I get the feeling of this wonderful whole, the ensemble that breathes, that does everything as a tutti. But then you search a little deeper and you can find individual voices that can really shine and come out. And the possibilities are so huge. And that's what really excited me. It was the feeling of wow, we can really just open so many doors.
And from your point of view, what difference do you feel you can make by being a principal conductor rather than a guest conductor? I mean, how do you feel?
It's like brushing your teeth. I mean, you've just got to do it. I think a principal conductor it's daily hygiene as well. We've got to tune chords, we have to work on sound and vibrato and phrasing, and it's, an orchestra can be very good. But I think, and I hope, I'm bold enough to say that, with a bit more of a regular presence from someone attending to them as a real group of living people and musicians, we can always build the standard and build the sounds. Because those things need work. Those things really need work. Always. So there's the daily hygiene, but also, programming, I hope we could really interest you and everyone else in what a chamber orchestra is capable of. Because, their language with Haydn, I hope you hear tonight, with Haydn and Mozart and, the high classicism, they play it so wonderfully, but of course there's so many other things. I think we're bringing to you Ligeti Piano Concerto in March, which is, and I hope, I don't know how many people, know that, or and maybe at the end of the first half, some people come out and say, well, God, that's not for me. but at least, I want to show and explore what's there in the repertoire. And tonight you're hearing the first pieces by Fauré. And actually this can be done by a symphony orchestra, but what's so interesting is to do it in a chamber orchestra and to find the phrasing, find classical phrasing within romantic repertoire, especially when we do Brahms or something like this, is very, very exciting.
Thank you very much. I mean, going on the subject of programming, looking through the list of programs you're doing with the orchestra this season, I'm struck and indeed enormously impressed by the sheer variety that you're taking on, working from Haydn, Mozart and Beethoven through to Ligeti and Henze, through to contemporary works, and with a fair amount of high romanticism in the middle as well. Can you tell us a bit more about your thoughts on the programming for your first season with the orchestra?
Yeah, well, I but there are 5 weeks this year because the contract was quite late and my diary was quite full, and so was theirs. So we found these 5 weeks. Next season will be 9, and the season after will be a little more. And I wanted to just open some doors, and I wanted to open up a Beethoven with a Mozart, a Haydn, and a Brahms, and just see where I was with them, where they were, and just sort of find ourselves with that. And with those sort of core repertoire pieces to maybe find the style of programming and ideas where we can bring in some certain pieces that audience members don't know and can be sort of attracted and find some excitement in that. And then also it's down to, you know, soloists. So, you know, actually for the rest of this week we've got we're doing some Berlioz, La Mort de Cleopatra with Karen Cargill. Well, I don't know if you've Karen been here? Yes. And so, for example, you know, that's what she wanted to do, I wanted her to do that, and then we build a program around that, and the Foray comes in, and there's the late romantic works, and then we return to Haydn. So there's variety, but I hope real shape and consistency. And I think as the seasons go on, that, you know, I'll, you know, program, you know, a few more just, you know, threads and cycles, you know, deal with the Paris symphonies, or whether it's a Beethoven route, or whatever it is, as we grow together.
That sounds terrific. Well, I was actually going to ask you about Berlioz, because you're actually doing quite a lot of Berlioz with the orchestra this season. Sadly not in St Andrews, although there is a special opportunity for St Andrews audiences to come and hear L'Enfance du Christ in Edinburgh. There should be a leaflet in your programme about that. But Berlioz is a very unusual composer for a chamber orchestra to focus on. I wondered what you felt that a chamber orchestra could bring to Berlioz, and also what you felt Berlioz would get out of the chamber orchestra.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are only sort of certain pieces with Berlioz that you can bring. I mean, we're not going to do the Trojans or the Symphony for Destiny, I promise. But you know, with L'Enfance, I mean, this piece is, it's so humble. It's so in its own. Colin Davis actually describes it as a collector's item in Berlioz's output, which is the most wonderful way of seeing it. And you know, I think you see a lot these days of the period orchestras. You know, the you know, orchestration enlightenments, or the romantique, you know, John Eliot Gardner's actually working on Berlioz, because the idea of phrasing and sound and dissonance, from which orchestras can get who are aware of those things in the style. I think Berlioz needs that. I think he needs that help in phrasing and sound, and that's what I'm really hoping to bring to it. The Cleopatra is a little bit bigger. It's, you know, trombones, and it's really his idea of, I mean, his harmony, his counterpoint. It's all, you know, it's just kind of bursting out of the box, and you have to find a way of really making sense of it. It's just a composer that I really love. And of course, Les Nuits d'été has probably been brought here by the orchestra as well. And, you know, there are some pieces that the chamber orchestra can do.
Yes, it would be lovely to hear you do that here, possibly even with the different singers for the different songs.
Yeah.
Another composer,
it's very expensive.
Probably why you would not appreciate that suggestion. Another composer you featured in your very first programme as principal conductor was Brahms, another composer not immediately associated with the chamber orchestra, although of course associated with the SCO through the recordings with Charles McHarris. What are your feelings about Brahms with the chamber orchestra, and what's it like taking on a piece so associated with one conductor's interpretation?
Well, actually, you know, the Brahms's preferred size of orchestra in minimum was 10 violins, 8, 5, you know, with 4 basses was exactly the size. So the idea that it's not chamber orchestra repertoire is kind of, I don't know how correct that is. You know, the whole sort of early 20th century, and you know, the expansion of everything, you know, the forces, you know, you get 16 first, and actually I hope by doing it in a chamber orchestra you're returning to something that's actually quite authentic in the way that Brahms would have thought. And to deal with the second point about facing such a huge work when an orchestra like this has played it with someone like McHarris, who's 60 years older than me, or whatever it is. I mean, the two real positive things that I immediately think of, this orchestra are just so incredibly open that when we get to the first rehearsal, I don't feel any baggage from them at all. And you know, that is credit to them. They're up there waiting to play and finding the phrase. And I mean, that's real beauty in musicianship. And and hopefully something already about our relationship, which I find very exciting. And secondly, as a conductor facing a piece, you only do it if you believe in it. I only do a piece if I believe in it. You know, it's very hard to stand up and try and conduct something that I haven't learned every single note backwards, forwards, you know, every around. And I wouldn't face it. So actually, it felt very confident doing it. But you know, it's the beginning of a journey, and it's a piece that I'll return to many times, and of course will do it many times on tours and you know all of this. And so, it was a wonderful experience last week, actually.
You mentioned the legacy that you're bringing here later in the season, and you've done some hands already with the orchestra. Do you have any thoughts about new pieces? Did you enjoy working with composers? Do you have thoughts about commissions that you'd like to do on the orchestra's behalf?
Definitely. I mean, with my last orchestra, where I worked in Sweden, we had a composer in residence, and that was a wonderful thing, just to actually have a composer in the family of the orchestra, and he could talk to the players, and you know, the whole wonderful thing about putting the baton down for a piece that's you know fresh off the paper is the fact that you feel as if you're really giving birth to this music. I mean, it's living, it's alive, and that's a real privilege and honor. And also, there's no Kleiber, Furtwängler, Knappertsbusch, you know, these huge giants sitting behind you saying this is the way that it should be done, and you know these huge interpreters, and it does give a conductor, you know, relatively young conductor, a freedom in interpretation, which is actually wonderfully liberating. And you could hear something and go, oh no, actually that should go double the speed, and just try it. And you know, it's that type of thing. But then again, it's about finding a contemporary voice and a composer that resonates with you. You know, I'm not just you don't really just want to program new pieces for the sake of programming. For me, it's about finding a relationship with the composer. And that's just, you know, going and listening to concerts and seeing. And I hope as my time with the SCO grows that, you know, we see that those relationships begin to take place. And maybe the idea of a composer in residence is a place to start.
Thank you. Speaking of things in residence, as most of you will know, our orchestra is now orchestra in residence at the university, and we're absolutely delighted about that. You were at Cambridge not so long ago, rather than conservatoire, and I wondered what you felt about the role of the university in music, and also whether there's anything particular that an orchestra such as this can bring to a university institution and indeed a university town. This is, of course, a rather self-interested question, but I'd still be very interested to have your thoughts on it.
Actually, just, you know, walking around these, you know, beautiful buildings, it did take me back a little bit to the university, and the idea that so many things are possible in a safe and loving environment. I mean, you know, at my university, sometimes I felt it was quite insular, but actually, you know, that is just a wonderful excuse, you know, for students to just focus in on something in detail. Because really, I found, you know, when you leave, it's quite difficult for them, those experiences to happen. But I would say the first it's a two-way responsibility. I mean, I hope the orchestra and myself, I hope we can give something, and I hope that we hold workshops and, you know, maybe even a scheme where players can come and sit in rehearsals and, you know, all of that that goes with it. But also, we need this hall full of students every time we come, and if it's not, then there's no point in having it. That's the two things that I would kind of say.
Yeah, we will do our best.
Yes, I think we will.
Looking at your career and how it's going to pan out over the next few years, you're doing a lot of work in the opera house as well as with the orchestra. How do you combine those two very different work schedules, and what do you think working in the opera house brings to the orchestra? You've mentioned several works with voice, but I'm interested to know how the two types of conducting relate to each other.
Well, it's also the process, you know, with a concert, you know, for this concert we've had a day and a half's rehearsal, and so you have to kind of go and hopefully be up here at the first rehearsal. In an opera, you know, especially if it's in a season house, you know, you have 6 weeks of rehearsal. And so there's this incredible burn, and you know, something will go up and then someone will have a low day or someone will get ill. It's for a conductor, it's wonderful to have the mixture of that, because it means for 6 weeks I can sit there. You know, I've just done Yennefer, my first Janacek, and the last year was Hansel and Gretel, and these huge works with, you know, learning the Czech pronunciation, learning, you know, the idea of who Janacek is, all that, you know, to be able to sit there for 6 weeks, 5 weeks, with a wonderful director, to basically have time to go, just spend a day just listening, just moving a pencil very gently to bring a singer in. For me, that's a wonderful thing. It gives my mind space, and also is a very exciting process. And then, I mean, so I've explained that, you know, the symphonic and the chamber is different. It's much quicker. But I think what opera gives me as a conductor, hopefully, is this idea of the beauty of the voice, you know, what the voice is capable of, and the way, if you have a singer that understands space and text, that they can turn a phrase and create sounds that inspire me to try and create those sounds in orchestras, and the way in which a violinist might, you know, do a beginning of an outpour, might be the beginning of a sound of a consonant, or mustn't disappear from the microphone, or whatever it might be. You know, it's very, I mean, technically though, it's very different. You know, with a you know, pianissimo with a chamber orchestra, you could just sort of, sometimes you don't even have to move. In an opera, if you don't move, then the whole bloody beast sort of grinds to a halt up there, and you suddenly have to realise you've got to carry on conducting. So there are all those technical things, and you know, here I can come onto the stage, I can collect myself, you know, we breathe and we make music. You know, in opera there's often a green light that I've got to wait for, the curtain goes up, I've got to wait for the stagehand to throw the whatever it is. The technical side of opera. I mean, opera is a huge compromise, but when it works, it's probably, for me, the greatest art form, you know, Berlioz and Tristan and Don Giovanni, you know, the idea of that text, the composer's response to that text, and then the final outcome is well, it's just incredible.
Quite. Of course, the SEO has performed operas in concert.
Yeah.
Is this something you'd plan more of?
Definitely. Yeah, we're planning.
Good. Can you share any
Probably not without getting shot from the lady that's shaking her head over there. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I think we have a little bit of time to take some questions from the floor if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Robin.
For myself or for the orchestra? Well, you know, I'm thinking, in terms of opera, I'm thinking in 2014 or 13 at the moment. You know, and so, because I only do about 2 or 1 operas a year, you know, I pick very carefully what I want to do and what I think will be ready in 3 years' time, and then maybe well, let's see if I'm ready in 3 years' time, you know, that kind of thing. With the orchestra, we're working now on, you know, a big overview of the 11-12 season, 2011 and 12, and, you know, because with touring, with getting soloists, you know, with the world-class soloists, that's when they're being booked up, and so basically orchestras, you know, the sooner you have your plan, the better you can work, and the SEO are wonderful at that. Is that an idea? Yeah.
Yes.
With regard to the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, do you have any selection of soloists?
A selection of soloists that I would personally love to work with.
No, do you have your solo artists imposed upon you?
Oh, I'm probably quite a controlling person as well. So I do also like to choose, and you know, there are relationships that I've had with soloists before I came here that I very much want to bring to the orchestra. And now I'm here with the orchestra, there's also a group of soloists, or, you know, ideas of soloists that I know now I'm with the SEO that we can attract the top names in the world, you know, the Emmanuel Axes or the Mitsuko Shidas of the piano world. And, you know, last week it was with Magdalena Kozhina singing. And, but I'm always completely open. You know, if the management or someone says, well, look, we've got an opportunity of working with this person, I'm always open. I mean, if it's an instrumentalist that I haven't heard of, I will ask for a CD, or maybe I'll go and hear a concert. And you know, because every week I do with the orchestra, I consider kind of golden. You know, I want to put it all in the right place, and so I do think very carefully about the soloists, and it's a good dialogue between me and the management. And what's so lovely is tonight that we have a soloist from the orchestra, Alison, and that is, you know, that creates a very different feeling for the week. You know, immediately it's this kind of real family, and there's this I hope you'll feel tonight, the players are just there for her, not in a way that they wouldn't be there for anyone else, but you know, it's family.
Yes.
Robin, from your experience so far, yes, what do you regard as being distinctive about the music performance of the players in the SEO? What is it that makes the SEO different from other chamber?
The first thing I always think is the idea of phrase, the idea of where the music's going to, where we've come from, and really they're incredibly intelligent in musical terms. I mean, what I mean is just everyone is, you know, whether we can feel the subdominant or the dominant or the idea of the tonic, you know, all of that, I really feel this orchestra responds to in a wonderful way. So that's something I would say I hold very dear. And the second thing is they're kind of, I can only describe it as the sort of chameleon-like feel of them. You know, this program, I hope we offer you up a very, very different sound world in the pieces of the Fauré, the sort of neoclassical Poulenc, and then Haydn. And I feel, you know, we've got period horns and trumpets for the Haydn. And you know, there aren't many orchestras that could really have a wonderful horn section in classical horn playing and modern horn playing. And so I think that they are an orchestra with capabilities of doing many things, which can realise my dreams in terms of how to program things. Because of course, if you're with a period orchestra, you can't have such a range of colours and a range of, you know what I mean, a range of styles in the program. And this and the third thing, I just think, sorry, I could go on all night, but one more thing is the idea of the individual and the tutti. That's just something, you know, you can really feel an individual voice. Even there are times when you look to the first violins, and sometimes they can make a sound when actually you sort of hear everyone, and that isn't such a bad thing. And then you look at them, and they make a sound that's just one violin. And so there's that feeling which is very, very special. Those are a couple of things. Thank you.
Listening to you, your language is very much being that of imagination and creativity, seems to me. What do you think is the best way of trying to inspire the young folk? I'm thinking students in this university, young people across Scotland in general.
Yeah. It's
a challenge.
It's just such a huge challenge, but it's about letting them feel that it's living, that it can affect them, affect them in a very positive way. I mean, I think the thing is why it's quite difficult is that I have a funny feeling that young people, because the world has so many things where you're just given things, the telly or whatever it is. Certain types of food, it's just kind of on tap. I think really to get the joy out of a Haydn symphony, you have to sit there and you have to really listen. You have to know how to be still. You have to know how to sing. And I think you have to somehow, to get them in, that has to be, I think they have to know that. Does that make sense? And that is kind of education. And it does start with education as well. But then, there are things, if we were a symphony orchestra and you come and do Rite of Spring and Young Person's Guide, that has a different effect, of course. And I think you know, the wham factor of a chamber orchestra is actually a little, possibly, I don't know yet, but I think it's probably a little less, that we have to go about it in a different way. And I would be really excited to explore that. And to, you know, maybe deconstruct a symphony in front of students that were able to know it, just try and show them why these composers were just incredible people, you know, touched by genius, you know, and the spiritual world, you know, that we can only really be servants to as musicians. I don't really, I'm sad I don't really have an answer, but maybe my journey hasn't yet properly begun with inspiring, you know, I'm trying to do as good a music as I can, and, you know, begin with an orchestra, and, you know, when we meet the students, I'm going to be there and ready for it, and we'll see what road it takes. Just feed them to me, and, you know, bring them here. We'll see. Sorry, no? It's so short.
Right, we should probably let you go. Thank you very much for all those very interesting answers. We look forward not just to tonight's concert, but to know more in the future. Thank you very much.
It's lovely to be here.